Hello, and let us learn a Sicha together. This Sicha, which is said on the Rebbe's father's yahrzeit, and talks about his father, Rabbi Levi, my namesake, is a beautiful Sicha said in 1972, connecting the Parsha to the Sicha, to the Rabbi Levi. Now, there's the edited version of Chelik Yudalit, and there's the unedited version. And personally, I found myself much easier to understand, and a lot of concepts are much more explained in the oral version, the way the Rabbi actually said it, rather than the edited version. So, although it's the same ideas, it's more explored, so I'll share it based on the unedited version. And it starts in Teres Menachem, the Farbrengen of Chaf of Tafshin Lamed Beis, 1972, Ois Tes to the end of the Farbrengen till Chafei. Now, we use the expression that's brought in Rashi this week, Kashem misasan shel tzadikim, kishvir saluchos, that the death of tzadikim is as difficult in front of Hashem like the breaking of the luchos. Rashi brings it in the context that right after the story of the luchos that Moshe Rabbeinu is recounting with the Jewish people, he talks about the death of Aaron, even though they were 39 years apart, and seemingly there's no reason that one should follow the other. And Rashi brings a bunch of reasons, and one of them is to compare the two powerful events. Now, what does it mean, kasha? So the Rebbe explains that the difference between easy and hard is not necessarily that one is one's bad, but rather you have to put a lot more effort. And that's why the Rebbe gives an example. When somebody puts a lot of effort, physical effort, you see the veins getting red because there's a lot of blood being pushed into the veins because of the effort. So when we say kasha lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that something's hard in front of Hashem, that means that it's a bigger revelation than usual. And that's why we use the expression kasha. And on a yahrzeit, we see this kasha element expressed more. How? The Rebbe says, let's first understand the comparison between the death of tzaddikim, the passing of tzaddikim, and breaking of luchos. Regarding the breaking of the luchos, Chazal tell us that when Moshe Rabbeinu, just before he broke the luchos, as he saw the Jewish people sinning with the golden calf, parach ois haksav me'aleim, the letters of writing flew off from the luchos. What does that mean? It means that the luchos, which were till now one with the lettering, because we know that they weren't written on, but rather engraved, something fell off. We'll explain in a moment what that means. And they became very heavy, and Moshe couldn't handle it, and he broke them. So too, when the neshama leaves a guf by the passing of a tzaddik, and the neshama and the guf during the lifetime had become one, because you can't separate in a live person the neshama and the guf. The neshama isn't everywhere. So when the neshama leaves, it's like the luchos, spirituality of the luchos leaves, and it's just heavy. Now, seemingly this shows something very negative, right? Both are very tragic events, but we find something amazing. The Rebbe says, very, very amazing. What is that? We know that when the Yidden would go to war, the Aron, the ark that went with them was the Aron, not with the luchos shniyos, with the second luchos, but with the first luchos, the broken ones. So a booming question is asked. We're told that when the Yidden went on Mitzrayim, when the Yidden would go out to war, who would go fight the war? Only somebody who has Yiras Shamayim and pure heart, has no Averis. Anyone that has Averis, go home. So they had to be tzaddikim. They're absolutely beautiful. So when they're going out to war, don't you want something that will be a defense and a merit for them rather than something negative? Why are you taking with these tzaddikim to war, the shivrei luchos, if they're totally negative? Says the Rebbe that this is proof that's not only negative chas v'shalom, but there's a limud chus, there's something positive and beautiful and merit, as we'll explain. And therefore, not only did you need tzaddikim to be the ones that went to war, but you needed the luchos as well. What is that? Continues the Rebbe. We said earlier that in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe says that when Rashi brings something in Pirushai Shalal Torah in the Torah. It means it has to be understood to even children who don't understand anything, learn anything more than Chumash and Rashi. Interesting, because in the edited version, it doesn't look so much like a Rashi Sicha, but in the unedited, it's much more Rashi Sicha. So Rashi cannot rely that you will learn other mefarshim, other commentaries to understand something. He has to expect you to, he has to allow you to understand it from his own text and from the Torah, especially in Pshat. So he says, Rashi, when he tells us regarding the Aron that would go out to them, with them, and the broken luchos were with them, he told us that where he tells us that in Baal Loischa and in Parshas Ekev, before he brings the fact that the death of tzaddikim is comparable to Hashem like the day of broken luchos, he explains that the Aron that went with the Jewish people was not for war was not the Aron that B'Tzalel made for the luchos, but rather the luchos Rishonis, the broken ones. So that means, according to Rashi, in Pshutei Shel Mikra, in the simple meaning of the text, the Aron, the ark that went with them to war, was only Shivrei luchos. Not according to other opinions that they had also the complete luchos. Rashi expects you to understand why the Yidden are going to war with broken luchos. What's the pshat? It seems to be prosecution, not defense of Am Yisrael. So the Rebbe says there are some mefarshim, there's some commentaries that say that the positive thing that happened with the broken luchos is similar to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because we know that Hashem let out his anger on Am Yisrael on stones and bricks, and Am Yisrael stayed alive. So to Shver Saluchos, Hashem let out the anger, so-called, on the luchos and allowed the Yidden to survive. Salachti kidvarecha, I forgive them. Now this fits with what Rashi says in Parshas Kisisa regarding the breaking of luchos through Moshe. Moshe, that Rashi brings over there, a mashal. There's a mashal, there's an example, there's an analogy of a king who went to another country and left his beloved, his engaged woman, together with the maidservants. And because she hung around with the maidservants, she got a bad name. So the person who was the shushvin, the person that was supposed to escort her to the wedding, her supervisor, rips up the ksuva because she was only engaged, she was only in arus, so she wasn't married. And he says, if the king is coming to kill her, I'll say she's not your wife. So too, what was the breaking of the luchos? So that there shouldn't be any document of marriage between Am Yisrael and Hashem. So now the Jewish people are like a single woman. They're not loyal. They don't have to be loyal. And therefore, they didn't accept the mitzvah leilachad kimachem, and therefore it's all good. It says the Rebbe, that idea that breaking the luchos was letting out the frustration on the stones, we don't even see by Rashi at all, not even a hint. But even with that, we still don't understand what's the mile. Why would you have to bring it to the war? Fine, he broke the document. He ripped up the document just like the Shushvein ripped the marriage document. But you're going to war, you're going with the tzaddikim. Why do you have to bring Chet HaEgel? We're told that every punishment that Yid gets for any sin they do, a bit of Chet HaEgel's there. So now you have to bring Chet HaEgel in front of the war that you didn't need a win. There has to be something more. So the Rebbe says, you'll understand this. Again, the Rebbe uses through understanding something amazing that Dvar Pella regards to the Medrash. That Medrash that talks about the breaking of the luchos, the ripping up, etc., says that the letters flew out, parach oisak sav me'alim, the letters flew out, v'nimtzu kvedim al yadav, and they found themselves now heavy on the hands of Moshe Rabbeinu, v'nishtadru, and they broke. Now, what does that mean? The original luchos were not made by man. The second ones were by Moshe Rabbeinu. The first one was made by Hashem. It says clearly, haluchos ma'aseh elikim, they were created by Hashem. Even before they had the writing of Michtav Elikim, they were Ma'aseh Elikim, they were created by Hashem. So when Hashem wanted to write the Aseret Hadibros, he didn't take regular stones, but he created the most beautiful stones. He literally created a new creation, luchos that are called Ma'aseh Elikim. And we're told that they are greater than anything that happened in Sheshis and Meveshis. So much so, we see that they're one of the 10 things that were created, according to Pirkei Avos, in Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashis, in twilight. And especially according to what the Rebbe says, based on what Tanya says at the end of Likutei Amarim, that the luchos were Maiselikim, and that's the level of Bria in Kabbalah, in Chassidus, which is greater than the rest of Maiselikim of the 6 days of creation, which is more in Asiyah. So Hashem created this incredible luchos, which is Maiselikim, and in this Maiselikim, he writes then Michtav Elikim, the writing. So why were the luchos broken? Ask the question, why were the luchos broken? Yes, the letters flew out. We're told, according to what we just said, the Medrash, Michtav, the Ksav fell out, but it's still Maiselikim, still created by Hashem. So the Rebbe says, we could answer that the fact that he broke the luchos was an outcome of the fact that the letters flew out. What does that mean? No, the Rebbe says, you could say that the Medrash is not exactly the way Rashi says, because Rashi says that he threw it from his hands, and Rashi explains, just if Pesach, which is only one of the mitzvahs a goy cannot have, Torah, this whole Torah is in the luchos, and the Yidden are now like goyim, the mumdim, I should give it to them. So you might say that that's why Moshe dropped it, not because it became heavy. In other words, you don't have to say that Rashi goes according to that medrash. But still, that doesn't answer why do you have to break it? Don't give it to them. And therefore, Rashi does bring the second point that it's like the Shushvin who rips it up. In other words, you might say, based on the other Rashi that Moshe said, but Pesach, one mitzvah makes them, Goy can't have, the Torah obviously Goyim can't have. So you might say that it didn't break because it got heavy, etc. But you still see the reason that he broke it. Rashi has to bring the reason because it was like the Shushvin. Says the Rebbe, so you could say that even according to Rashi, the fact that the Ksav flew out makes sense. And that's why he dropped it. Why? Because if you don't say the letters flew out, then you mean that there was simple stone, there was nothing left, then why do you have to break it? There's nothing wrong with it. So you must say that the spirituality of the letters flew out. So there was this Michtav Elikim that flew out, but not the actual Ksav. Because if the Ksav fell out, then all he's holding is a stone. What's the problem? Why does he have to break it? Like the Rebbe says, that it's a klutz kasha. The fact that the letters were flying, that we say that the letters were flying, that means that the luchos were still complete, and only after that he broke. That's shaykh only if to say that the letters were flying is only said if you wrote it down, but over here it was engraved. All the 620 letters of the Aseret Adibus were engraved, oisgekritzt. So how could they be flying if they were engraved? So you must say that the flying cannot be a physical thing, but rather a spiritual thing. The spirituality fell out, and therefore the luchos, by default, were supposed to be heavy. They were 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim. And you need a lot of space to write 12 Aseret Adibus. But through the letters of the Michtav Elikim, through the spirituality, what happened? The luchos became Chai Noisei Asatzmei, just like on Shabbos, there's a law that a living person carries himself, and technically if you carry another person in Rishus HaRabim, you're not chayiv for carrying because they carry themselves, so too the luchos carry themselves. And the Rebbe says even a child can understand that something carries themselves that's alive. So what do you mean that the oisius flew out and became heavy? Not that the hollow places got filled up, because again, why would he break it? It's talking about the chayas of the oisius. So basically, the oisius became one with the stone, and it stayed that way. But the spirituality left out, the Michtav Elikim. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu had to break it because the letters were still there that said, Lo yilech Elikim acherim. So he has to break it because, just like the Shushvin that has to rip up the Ksuva, the letters are there. So basically, what do we walk out of this little section? We walk out of the section, now why did Moshe Rabbeinu break it, even according to Rashi? Because the spirituality left, but the physical letters were there, and therefore you had to rip up the contract. Says the Rebbe, even though Rashi doesn't clearly say that the oisius flew out, You could understand it from the fact that Rashi says that the death of tzaddikim is similar to the breaking of the luchos. Why? Regarding death, we know that first the neshama leaves the guf, then the guf, at the moment the guf is still alive, and slowly but surely the guf decays into the earth, and even tzaddikim gemurim, they go into dust at least one moment before Tchias HaMesim. That's what it says in the Gemara Shabbos. Now, because Rashi compares the death of tzaddikim to the breaking of luchos, so you must say that the luchos were the same way like that the tzaddikim. Obviously, a 5-year-old understands this. That first, the chayis went out of the oisius, just like the neshama goes out of the guf. There's still the luchos, just like the guf exists. And slowly but surely, it breaks the luchos, just like Moshe Rabbeinu breaks the luchos, just like the body decays. Rashi doesn't say clearly that the oisius flew out, because it's not negayed to Pshat Shel Mikra. It doesn't have an impact on Pshat Shel Mikra, but the fact that Rashi doesn't say that doesn't mean that he doesn't believe it. That's what the Rebbe says. So according to the fact that we said, even according to Rashi, there has to be the space that says that the oisius flew out, we're going to understand the question of Pshat Shel Mikra. The simple meaning text, when the 5-year-old reads that Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchos, the child asks, who gave Moshe Rabbeinu permission to break the luchos? And this is not only mitzad svara, it even says you're not allowed to disgrace, you're not allowed to erase Hashem's name. It's a lo yisasum ken l'Hashem leichechem. You can't scrape out Hashem's name. So how was Moshe Rabbeinu able to scrape out Hashem's name? So you could say that the takel was prohibited, but Moshe Rabbeinu had Mesiras Nefesh to do so. But according to what we just said, that Rashi, in the simple meaning of the text, in Pshat Shel Mikra, says that the oisius were flying, we could say that Moshe Rabbeinu saw that Hashem started breaking the luchos, he took out the spirituality. So he saw Hashem's already breaking it, so he broke it. In other words, he saw that Hashem's already starting the breaking process, he's taking out something out of it, so he finishes the process. Says the Rebbe like this. Again, this unedited version is a bit different than the edited version, but personally I was able to understand it much better, and it's much more geschmack. Now, says the Rebbe, we still don't understand the reason that the breaking of the luchos was like the ripping of the ksuva. Why? Because regarding Chet Egel, we know that there were many categories of the Jewish people. Most of the Yidden didn't sin the Chet Egel, and the women definitely didn't sin. And the whole idea of arvus, that we're responsible for one another, only happens in the 40th year, Atam Mitzav Ma'yam Kulchem, etc. So whatever, you might say that the only reason other people were responsible, they should have done a chiach techiach, they maybe weren't responsible, but they should have still, rebuked them. So the Rebbe says that even though the fact that Hashem got angry on everybody, that means that even the people that didn't have any connection to the Chet Egel and were far away, they obviously were some part involved because at least they heard it and they should have done something to it, to hear about it. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to hear it all the way on the Har Sinai expects, that means other people heard it as well. Now, according to, we could understand the people that sin in the Egel, you have to break the luchos for them. But the other, what did they do? They didn't give Musar, B'Seder. Each Yid was given Anochi Hashem Elekecha, and the majority of the Yidden didn't sin. And we just said that although the letters flew out, the Michtav Elikim, this is still Ma'aseh Elikim, created by Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashas. So why did Moshe Rabbeinu break it? Fine, they're a little guilty, but still, it has to be broken for them. Says the Rebbe, that's what the Medrash comes and tells you, that it became heavy on Moshe's hands. Even though the luchos were incredible, they were created in Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashas, but the moment Aseres Hadibris, the spirituality flew out, it became heavy. Why? Says the Rebbe, beautiful insight. This is really the heart of the Sicha, both in the edited and the non-edited version. When the luchos were just luchos without Michtav Elikim, then they were incredible in the fact that they were created by Hashem Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashas. But the moment they receive the elevation of Michtav Elikim, they become a whole different level. They're now just Michtav Elikim. And the moment you take out the Michtav Elikim, you're taking out everything that was in there, and the lily becomes heavy. Moshe can't hold it, and it breaks. And so too with the death of tzaddikim. A Yid's body was created by Hashem choosing it. The Tanya tells us, Uvana Bacharta means the guf. Because in the neshama, it's not a bechira. There's no choice. Obviously, the neshama is better. He chooses the guf. However, and the Rebbe goes over there into interesting conversation about Avon Ben and various relationships. But it's not so much an edited version, so we'll skip it. Comes the Rebbe and says, however, the guf has no recognizable thing that it is spiritual. When do you see the spirituality? When the neshama comes in. And then you start serving with the guf. I'm here to serve Hashem. You become one with the neshama. That's how you bring out the up of the milah, the incredible thing of the guf. So according to this, we could understand what it means that the death of tzaddikim causes a breaking of the guf, just like the luchas. The fact that even a tzaddik gamar, a complete tzaddik, has to go back to dust one moment before Tchias HaMesim is because just like the luchas, once the Michtav Elikim came into the luchas became only Michtav Elikim. In the second you take a Michtav Elikim and say everything's gone, so too with the neshama and the guf. Yes, the guf is what Hashem chose, but the moment the neshama comes in, it becomes absolutely intertwined and you start appreciating incredible luchnius and you work with the neshama. So when the neshama leaves the guf and you can't do any Torah mitzvahs, then the guf is nothing anymore. Even though Hashem chose the guf, but the moment they became one with the neshama, when you take out the neshama, the guf's nothing. And that's why we carry the broken luchas when we go to war. Why? It's dangerous. That's why we tell people who just got married not to go, people who just built a house not to go, etc. Now, the question is, why should we have to go to war? Everything's good. They're old tzaddikim, right? We said that the warriors are old tzaddikim. Why can't they just stay where they are? And the answer is the Shivrei Luchos. Just that the Shivrei Luchos tell us that the moment you get next level, the previous level's nothing. The second you get Michtav Elikim, the Ma'aseh Elikim turns into nothing. What's Ma'aseh Elikim? So what? We create nothing. And that's why the moment you take a Michtav Elikim, Ma'aseh Elikim is nothing. So too, the next level compares the previous level to nothing. In other words, you have to continue going Ma'ala B'Kodesh. And the moment you moved, you have to go to the next level. And you have to break yourself and do everything to conquer Eretz Yisrael, and obviously the Eretz Yisrael within your own heart. Says the Rebbe, and that this is something beautiful that happened to the Rebbe's father. This back to the edited version. The Rebbe's father, the Levi Yitzchak, died, passed away, Dafken Galus, Kastrama, years after he was sent away by the communists. And the Rebbe says that in a way, we're told that torture is worse than death. Like we see the Hanani, Mishal Vazaria, the Gemara tells us that had they been tortured, they would have given in and bowed down because it wasn't pure Avodah Zarah. It was just a principle that they didn't want about the Muchanetzar. But had they been tortured, they would have given in. So you see torture is worse than death. So when Levi Yitzchak, on the time of his death, on the yahrzeit, after being in Galus, he suffered so much. So the shvira is the breaking of death is kasha, because he achieved such an incredible level compared to where he was before. So each and every one of us who's connected to Rabbi Yitzchak also gets upgraded on this incredible level, each and every one of us on this day. L'chaim, l'chaim.